I'm going to speak with Thom Malone in just a moment. It's obviously been a cataclysmic week for racing, but we're still just 2 weeks out from Cheltenham. So in the background, the Cheltenham preparation is continuing, and that's what we're going to talk about in terms of those. But also, we're going to talk about the impact on racing generally of the fallout from the Gordon Elliott situation. Thom, good morning to you. How are you?
Hey, Ger, how's it going?
It has been a cataclysmic week for the reputation of racing. How is racing dealing with this? Because it seems like the backlash to the backlash kind of got underway yesterday. Ted Walsh came out and said, come on, everybody, you know, let's not kill this man here. He's in a bad way. There's a really excellent piece from Keith Donoghue talking about his own struggles in life and how Gordon Elliott helped him in the Racing Post today. Is any of this carrying over, do you feel, into the mainstream, where the mainstream has started to kind of, you know, cool their jets a little bit?
I think so, and I think there is a slight English-Irish divide on that cooling of the jets as well. Joe captured it nicely yesterday on Twitter as well. You know, I think everyone does need to calm down a little bit and let the process go through. Now, in saying that, let's not let Gordon Elliott completely off the hook, but we also need to accept that due process needs to happen here. A punishment needs to be meted out, and it needs to be fair. And at the start, like you said, when we spoke on Monday morning, Ger, this situation was still on the way up in the sense of the explosion. I think finally we might be just on the way down in the court of public anger. But racing does seem to be now rallying around Gordon Elliott a little bit, and I think racing probably needs to be a little bit careful in how much support they give him and what way they support him. He needs support from his doesn't deserve his career to be destroyed, but he also needs to get an appropriate punishment, and like the pressure the IHRB must feel at the moment, because like we said on Monday as well, Ger, there is no precedent for this in racing. And I'm kind of struggling to think of any sport where there's sort of precedent for this situation. But yeah, racing are very much rallying around their man at the moment, and there's certainly a concern about Gordon Elliott's well-being as well. And you would hope that he is able to recover from this, and it is going to destroy him, as he said in his piece in the Racing Post. And this image will unfortunately define him for a very, very, very long time. But we're kind of now in a situation where we really need to see what happens with the process, because as we mentioned on Monday, it's an enormous organization that still needs to keep going. Some owners are saying they're sticking by him. Those owners are going to want to have runners at Cheltenham. The BHA have said they want those horses to be at Cheltenham. So how this all plays out, and again, very quickly in the next couple of days, is going to be intriguing.
Yeah, I think that's the main kind of political intrigue that has to happen. The BHA banned him from having any runners while the investigation was ongoing. And then their head of equine safety is in the papers today saying, well, we don't mean that they can't run at Cheltenham. I mean, obviously, they're going to be able to run at Cheltenham. So it's kind of like we were seen to act. We acted really quickly, but actually what we did now, we're not really sure if we're allowed to do that. On what basis were we doing that? And also, what if, say, for example, an owner who was of a mind was to take the BHA to court and say, you're preventing me from, on what basis? Where's your own rules that would prevent me from running my horses at Cheltenham or Aintree, for example?
Yeah, and I mean, the BHA in this case, as Lydia Hislop said on Tuesday evening's show on Off the Ball, the BHA, the only power they have within their jurisdiction is to decline entries, because Gordon Elliott is licensed in Ireland. So he is licensed to the IHRB, the old turf club, as we said. So the BHA are using the only power they have in declining his entries. And now they're kind of having to roll back in a little bit. But, from what I understand, pressure came on the IHRB, or pressure came on the BHA rather, to make a decision. And it is very much seen as, Gordon Elliott and this image is persona non grata now at Cheltenham and Aintree. And like we mentioned on Monday, these 4 to 6 weeks for racing, they're just so aware of their public image, and they were acting in maintaining and hoping to, maintain that public image in some way. But maybe now they're kind of like, oh, no, we're actually denying people and I don't mean Gordon Elliott, but I do mean Gordon Elliott's stable staff. I do mean Gordon Elliott's owners who've paid an enormous amount of money and, set up for basically 2-3 years to get horses to arrive in this situation. And now they're kind of looking 2 weeks out from Cheltenham, and you have a situation where either you move your horse to another yard, which, they don't want to, many of them won't want to do because they don't want to seem to abandon a man in his hour of feet, which is an understandable position as well. So, the owners have been put in a very, very difficult position by the posturing of the BHA, essentially acting outside their own remit.
Thomas, it seems that there are two things at play if you're an owner here. First of all, as you mentioned, there is the image question. Does it look bad if my horses are associated with Gordon Elliott? But second of all, there's probably naturally a real element of concern about your horses after you see the image initially. So does more need to be done from Gordon Elliott's side to put forward the fact that he does look after horses well, rather than just the PR side, an actual proof to the owners and to the people involved that actually this was an outlier?
The problem here is that we're in COVID, so you can't, normally in this situation, what you do is just invite everyone into your yard. And then you'd be like, well, just open your eyes and look around. I mean, an example I can think of off the top of my head would be Stamcrow, who obviously is a difficult enough horse to train. And as he had mentioned in a Cheltenham preview a couple of weeks ago, he went and built Stamcrow his own basically stable with a garden so he could live this kind of existence. So it was more like a wild horse, essentially, where he had, shelter in one corner, but he had essentially a big back garden in his stable. I mean, those kind of actions are not someone that doesn't care for their animals. And again, it's kind of difficult for him to communicate it, just given the situation at the moment, because obviously, he's under investigation for this horrific image. But it's very difficult to kind of allay people's fears who have their doubts anyway. The problem is the people who probably think the worst of my guests here maybe had an impression of horse racing anyway, and that's now been cemented. So it's very difficult to change their minds. And then there are just concerns for ordinary lay people. And how do you get a message across when essentially you can't really invite people into the yard to let them see? Any of the press, their caveat when talking about Gordon Elliott during the week, myself included, is anytime you go up there, you're kind of blown away by the place. It's one of the most incredible training facilities I've ever seen. It's newly built. He bought a cattle farm a few years ago and he turned it into a training facility, an incredible training facility, huge and successful one, from a greenfield site. So the notion that horses up there are not well cared for, and that's the other thing, as Lydia Hislop said, horses are not well cared for, don't win. So you can't be in a situation where you're basically having more winners than almost anyone else in Britain and Ireland over the course of, a 4, 5, 6 year period, when your horses are not being cared for well.
That's interesting, Tom, because there was definitely, and Dan McDonald brings it up today in the Irish Independent, and it was an issue on Liveline during the week as well. And it was the phraseology that was used in the Irish Times earlier too, about him being an outsider in racing. And so it felt as if there was people within racing who were also happier to put the boot in earlier in the week. And that whole conversation about the culture and all that kind of stuff, I think the point you make there, if that's what people believe, if that's what you, as somebody who has been involved in racing your whole life, believes, that horses who are badly treated won't win over a sustained period of time. You might get a trick out of a horse by treating one of them badly, but all of your horses wouldn't be winning as much as Gordon Elliott's had done if they weren't cared for, and there'd be some signs of it, and there would have been rumours of this stuff before. But as far as I'm aware, there's none of that. There's none of that in the background here. There's no sense of ill treatment at all. Was some of the viciousness because he wasn't part of racing royalty, because he was a self-made man, because, let's face it, he's not a great communicator and he doesn't play to the crowd?
I mean, there have been many axes ground in the last couple of days. I don't think there can be any doubt about that. There was one particular piece from America. It was, the headline was just ban him. And then it turned into like this personal tirade just because Gordon wasn't particularly communicative in an interview with them, And there is that element of that he, sometimes he doesn't really play the media game. And that definitely an element of that is some shyness. Now, again, I don't want to be seen as defending Gordon Elliott because obviously, what happened in this image is awful, but he is undoubtedly an outsider. There is no doubt about that. You look at any other of the major trainers in Ireland, flat or national hunt, and the vast majority of them have come from a racing lineage. Their fathers, their grandfathers, their surnames are synonymous with the game in training and riding. Gordon Elliott is not that. He learned from Martin Pipe. He went over to Martin Pipe as a young man, and Martin Pipe, another outsider essentially of the game who completely changed things in the UK and, for the better. But he, again, another outsider, and that's who Gordon Elliott learned from. And there is definitely a feeling of axe has been ground, and there is definitely a feeling that Gordon Elliott is a little bit of an outsider. But now I think we're at the stage where, again, we just kind of want to see where this disciplinary process goes, because kind of too many people are being left in the lurch now. While this sort of rage was burning over the last 2 days.
Yeah, that rage seems to have passed. So Cheveley Park took their horses, and you can completely understand their logic. You can also understand Gigginstown. They were out first, and they said, "Look, that we're going to keep ours." So it's the ones who come after, which is why Philip Reynolds is important, and then a few more over the next, particularly of horses who are going to be competitive over the next month, essentially. That'll have a big bearing on whether or not those horses are allowed to run, how they're allowed to run. The suggestion yesterday was that from Ted Walsh that he hand over voluntarily his licence for a period of time. Would that allow somebody else to train in those facilities? So there's two assistant trainers who've been linked with the gig who already work there and who would know the horses. And as Keith Donoghue pointed out, these horses have routines. NYLN is particularly finicky, and they put special boots on them. I had no idea about any of that kind of stuff. But, Henry de Bromhead will have to learn that really quickly, and it sounds like they're in communication, and that's all fine. But if you're an owner, you want your horse to have the best chance of winning in Cheltenham and therefore also in Aintree. So what fudges do you see possible here that will allow everybody to feel like some form of justice is served, the man is not crucified, and he's taught a lesson? And none of the owners and the staff get punished for this action?
What I genuinely thought would happen, or maybe is happening already, is that Gordon Elliott would kind of approach the IHRB with a solution. I would say that, the problem with the two assistants is that they don't have a license. They're not, so you need to, so there would be people around who would have been qualified trainers, maybe they would have lapsed or whatever. So there is a kind of an element of bureaucracy that needs, so they would kind of need someone who is a trainer to come in and take over. I mean, a precedent for this would be in the UK, where Mahmoud Al-Zaruni, now he was an employee trainer for Godolphin. He was banned, and then they brought in Charlie Appleby essentially as a replacement. So there is an element of precedent, so all the horses didn't need to be moved, but it is a slightly different situation in that Gordon Elliott literally owns the yard. It's his yard. So I would say they will try and keep the team in place as much as possible, try and bring in a person, and then Gordon would maybe, volunteer to maybe kind of self-exclude essentially from racing. He won't be at the races. He won't be involved in the day-to-day training, but essentially he lives there. So I don't know how
he literally lives right in the middle of it. Like we were down there 4 years ago, and to the day actually ahead of a Cheltenham preview. Yeah. The house is right there. Like it's literally in the same kind of outcrop. So it's a complicated scenario, and I don't wish the people dealing with it any further difficulties, because it's obviously quite tangled. But at the same time, like taking someone's livelihood away for a sustained period of time is essentially not in keeping with the nature of the offence. It's not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, you have to consider that the crime is in no way related to his achievements. So, like, it's not like he doped the horse and because of that doping, he achieved success. So the two are kind of two completely separate unrelated elements, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, normally you'd have, say, someone, oh, well, they profited from a stroke and that's how they brought this disrepute, or they landed a gamble, or they stopped a horse. You know, there is no kind of relationship to an incident on the race course which led to Gordon Elliott's success or another person not winning a race out of this. So that's a key part of the decision-making process as well. It was an horrific incident and an incredibly stupid thing to do. And again, something that has been, you know, added to the situation by how badly it was dealt with subsequently, even before the image was you know, brought out. So that is, they have to find a punishment for that without, like you say, undoing the career that he has built, like I said, for himself, by himself.
Yeah.
As one of racing's very few self-made men.
Yeah, okay, it's a tricky situation, but you know, I think the lawyers will get involved, certainly, and
yeah,
I wouldn't be terribly surprised if some kind of solution is found that in a couple of months' time we can all be talking about something else. Right, Tom, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. We didn't get to talk about Cheltenham, but we'll do that properly next week.
we will. Thanks, Chair.
There was plenty else to talk about.